לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת. The mystery of the Eucharist. Who instituted the Eucharist? First, let's gather all the contextual evidence. First, it's important to familiarize oneself with Greco-Roman mythology. In Greek mythology, the followers of Dionysus drank wine and ate bread, representing the blood and body of Dionysus, believing that doing so would bring them into divine ecstasy and communion with the Son of God. In Roman mythology, the blood of bulls was believed to have life-giving properties, and the ritual meal in Mithraism was seen as a way to partake in Mithras' power and eternal life. Wine was used most often. In Egypt, followers of Osiris ate bread, representing his scattered limbs, and drank beer as his blood to celebrate the resurrection of Osiris from the dead. Geographically, the Christians early were surrounded by Mithraism, the Osiris cult, and Dionysianism. More interestingly, Paul goes to all of the major cities where Mithraism is practiced, such as Antioch, Ephesus, and Rome, to name a few. Corinth, Greece, did not have any archaeological Mithras sites found. However, Myrthus was mainly a religion of the Roman military and merchants. That's why I think Corinth is at the heart of Mithraism, at least in terms of communication and the exchange of ideas. Corinth was one of the major port cities in the ancient world, where military men and merchants would pass through at high volume. Even more striking, the Gospels are the only other place where the Eucharist is located. Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Interestingly enough, according to a consensus of New Testament scholars, Mark was most likely written in Rome, the actual religious heart of Mithraism. Matthew was likely written in Antioch, Syria, another major city for Mithras practice. Luke was most likely written in Antioch, modern-day Turkey. And John was most likely written in Ephesus. Again, each of the Gospels happens to be written in cities where Mithras religious sites have been found, indicating widespread practice in the area and giving good geographical insight into the spread of Mithraism at the time around the early church. The Eucharist crisis occurred in Corinth because the port area was a central switching station for many Mediterranean sea travelers, bringing nearly all Roman-occupied peoples in contact with one another more so than other cities. Other than Jews, everyone else would have been highly familiar with and probably practiced drinking wine and eating bread in the name of Dionysus, Mithras, Osiris, or all three, or some combination of the three, meaning the Gentile Paul would have been in contact with would have been well aware of ritualistic consumption of the divine. That appears true. Paul seems to be answering someone's objection in 1 Corinthians 10:18 to 22. Consider the people of Israel. Do not those who eat the sacrifices participate in the altar? Do I mean then that food sacrificed to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, but the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons too. You cannot have a part in both the Lord's table and the table of demons. Are we trying to arouse the Lord's jealousy? Are we stronger than he? Paul makes a couple of things apparent. First, there is a recognition that there is a conflation between the cup of the Lord's offering and the offering of the cup of the demons, a reference to Dionysus, Mithras, and Osiris. Yet Paul exclaims that despite whatever similarity there is between the Eucharist and the offering of the cup of the demons, Christians cannot offer to the name of false gods, idols, or demons. Therefore, Paul permits the Christians to partake in the offering, but only if it is in the name of the God of Israel alone. And alone is a vital adage here, because Paul is also rejecting the idea of sharing the offering collectively between the God of Israel and the other false gods, which would be a common common practice in the ancient world among pagan people. He makes this point clear in verses 27 and 28. If an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. But if someone says to you, "This has been offered in sacrifice," then do not eat it. Again, for Paul, it's about who the offering is being offered to, not the offering itself, indicating to me that someone, again, probably a close friend and convert to Christianity, told Paul that drinking the blood and eating the body of the gods is the real way to worship the gods. And for Paul, all he had to do was drop the S of gods and accept the offering in the name of Christ, as he literally says in verse 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. I see no reason why Paul would not easily adapt to the blood communion of Myrthus into a blood communion of Jesus using the principle he espouses. This makes a lot of sense as to why Christianity may have spread so fast. It is Christianizing Greco-Roman paganism, making it more suitable for such audiences. After all, Paul says in one chapter earlier, 1 Corinthians 9:20-22, to the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. And look at what the Jews accuse Paul of in Acts 18:13. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to Torah. They charge Paul exactly in the same way as warned not to do in Deuteronomy 12:31, you must not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. Again, notice the attention on the way worship is being given to God. Contrary to what Paul is saying, God rejects the idea of worshiping him with the same offerings and praise as the false gods did. Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu.